morning, everyone. Just a quick update about the college. Might be interesting for you. We've had several semesters now of an enrollment uptick. Students that are obeying the call of God in their life to want to step into ministry, vocational ministry, to live a life of ministry. All of our degrees are geared for local church ministry-oriented things, but we know that students are going to come, and maybe they'll come for a year, and then they're going to go off to the university. We don't offer degrees like universities offer, but we'll set them up for success. But one of the things that's really driven us forward of late with regards to our mission of equipping servant leaders, our vision of late has been redefined, or maybe not redefined, refined because of a growing need in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. That would include Alaska. Churches that are supporting our college, about 150 churches or so in the 8 states of the Pacific Northwest fund and support our college. There's a growing vacancy of preaching pastors and youth pastors in our churches. And there's a growing need to help preaching pastors that are in their 60s think about a succession plan. And we're seeing actually how many preaching pastors do not have a succession plan. So the growing need for BBC to be a resource to help these churches have good, solid leaders is more significant maybe than we've ever seen it in the 77 years of the college. We think we have a good track record. I was sharing with Daryl yesterday that we have some data. Maybe you're interested in some data. We have some data since 1990. We track our 4-year graduates since 1990. What about our 4-year graduates? What do they step into ministry? That's what we kind of equip them to do, train them to do. All of our degrees are biblically hefty, and every degree has a core of biblical theological stuff. Do they feel prepared? And so we began tracking since 1990 how many of our 4-year graduates, our bachelor's degree graduates, actually step into ministry. We discovered this. Since 1990, 90% of our graduates step into ministry for 5 years after they graduate. 90% of our graduates step into ministry and they stay there for up to 5 years. So we began tracking the data. What happens after the 5-year mark? Do they stay any longer than that? And actually, since 1990, our data shows of our alumni with their 4-year bachelor's degree, 76% of them stay beyond the 5-year mark into long-term ministry. What that tells us is we're actually, by God's grace, doing that's our business. Our business is to equip them and to do that, and they feel equipped and prepared. And if we can help them slide into a healthy church like this church where they can be encouraged and loved and even mentored along a little further, then they're going to be in it for the long haul. That's what we exist for. So I think that our mission and our vision can help be a supply for the need in the Pacific Northwest, with more churches growing older with their preaching pastors and more churches having vacancies in their leadership. So would you pray with us about that? We're about equipping servant leaders who would be brave and who would be resilient and who would be gritty and steadfast for the long haul. And you are a supporting church. I want to say thank you for your encouragement. I want to kind of chase that thought down a little bit more via a story. So this may not necessarily be a Bible study class where we're going to crack our Bibles open and really expose a text. I just have one verse I'm kind of building on near the end. Let me just tell you a bit of a story that might be related to the college. So when students come to BBC, they're in a season of doing quite a few firsts. Can you think of some firsts in your life? Like, I remember doing that first. For example, do you remember when you first applied for that job? The first job. Do you remember that when you first went and got the application and how you felt and filled it out? And do you remember the first interview you had? How about the first time you got behind the steering wheel? Can you recall that? Maybe some of you remember that well. Or do you remember taking the driver's license for the first time? Do you remember the driver's license test person? Can you picture that person? Can you imagine can you recall the route they had you take and do? And series of firsts create a lot of anxiety, don't they? Do you remember the first time you actually voiced, "I like you"? Do you remember the first time you said that to that person? Do you recall that? The first time that you went on a date? Do you remember the first date? Huh. Takes a lot of bravery, right? Hopefully that wasn't an unpleasant memory I just pulled up for you. At Boise Bible College, we do something that could be like largely a first for many of our students. From the Pacific Northwest is where we largely recruit from. And Nick, we actually have a student from Virginia. That's kind of cool, from the East Coast. Mostly from the Pacific Northwest. When they come, many of them have never gone whitewater rafting. And so we're right near some whitewater rapids, and we take them on a rafting trip the Sunday before classes start on Monday. And it's kind of a fun thing to do right before classes begin. We take them on the Lower Payette River. If you know much about Idaho and whitewater rafting, the North Payette River is like world class. People from around the world will come and they'll whitewater the North Payette. Usually someone dies in North Payette. It's that rough. We don't take them there. We take them on the Lower Payette. The Lower Payette's kind of a lazy, sort of a Missouri sort of a river with a few rapids. It's not too bad at all. But we call it a whitewater rafting trip because there's about 5, maybe we hit the 3 class, level on the whitewater rapids on that, and it's fun. It's kind of fun. A lot of the kids have never ever been whitewater rafting, and it's a little nerve-wracking for them. They're not quite sure what this is going to be like. We got the vest on, and they group up, and they got a guide, and there they go, and they'll jump in, they'll get soaked, and they're freezing afterwards because the water's chilly, and it's a great memory. But it does, we don't force them, we just invite them, and it does take those who sign up to kind of swallow their pride and be a little more brave and courageous. We love that. We love that. And we don't guide them as a staff. We hire a company, and they've got trained guides, professional guides, and they maneuver around really well, and it's a blast for our kids. But it does take a bit of courage. It seems that we need some servant leaders like that. Not only is it a fun, cool Idaho experience, but it actually fits really well with our mission. That you would be willing to push off of shore and get on a journey, maybe a little unknown journey. And what we are seeing is not many want to leave the safety of the shore, metaphorically speaking. Not many want to. I think many are called, but don't necessarily always obey. But actually Jesus said, Matthew 9:37 and 38, "Pray, ask me to send out more workers for the harvest, because they are few." Not many, not enough. So pray, ask me. Bend to my ear. Beg of me. It's actually an imperative command. It's you will not be bothering me to ask to send out more, to push off from the shore, and to get out into the waters. So I want to kind of chase that down a bit, because I think there's a story here of the few that grit and resilience becomes a character-shaping aspect of their life. It requires courage and assurance of the guide, a family, a team, a cohort. I recently reread the story, heard of the story, but in an article by Tim Elmore, he reminded me of the story, The Incredible Journey, that happened on March 9th, 2022. March 9th, 2022, a sunken ship was discovered about 10,000 feet down in the ocean floor of the Antarctic. This was discovered. Underwater drones were hired and wired up, to discover Sir Ernest Shackleton's ship. Have you heard this story? So it's an amazing story. This famous ship lost at sea on a daring voyage. And he was a competitor. I understand his characteristic was he was a dreamer. He was a charismatic, brilliant man. He and his crew in 1914 set out to reach the South Pole and establish a base in Antarctic's Weddell Sea coast, McMurdo Sound, if you're familiar with that. Here's the map. The challenge was that the Antarctica's Weddell Sea is an enormous harbor of floating ice. That was the challenge. It's log jammed year after year with thick ice fields. So Shackleton theorized that his ship could just cut through the ice to the Antarctic coastline. If you're familiar with the story, if you're not, here's what happened. The ship became trapped in the sea ice and drifted in the fields of ice for about 10 months. Shackleton and his team of more than 24 men waited on board for those 10 months for the ice to thaw. They kept warm in the hull of the ship, and they even, on spare time, played a little football on the ice. But in the spring, the ice began to shift, and the blocks of ice began to grow in size. And they also began to slowly crush his ship. Eventually, it slipped below the surface of the sea. As you can imagine Shackleton and his team, they had to disembark. They got everything off. They had plenty of time to get their supplies and lifeboats off, but they were distraught. Especially Shackleton, distraught at the loss of his sailing vessel. So for the next 5 months, the expedition, they kind of drifted on the ice floe in the Weddell Sea. Finally, they ventured by boat to an uninhabited island called Elephant Island. Elephant Island. It's about 150 miles northeast of the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. Upon landing on Elephant Island, they survived on seal meat and penguins, even their dogs. They took sled dogs with them. So. But they had to press on. Shackleton and five others actually boarded a small 23-foot boat for a 16-day, 800-mile journey through gale-force winds, up to 50-foot ocean swells en route to another island, to South Georgia Island. Another small, treacherous island in the northeast of Elephant Island just a bit, but there was an active seaport there. That's why they went there. So here's a picture of the southern Georgia, right there, southern Georgia Island. Beautiful in many ways, but awfully rugged. Shackleton wrote this, quote, "The tale of the next 16 days is one of supreme strife amid heavy waters. The sub-Antarctic Ocean lived up to its evil winter reputation. We fought the seas and the winds and at the same time had a daily struggle to keep ourselves alive. At times, we were in dire peril." After Shackleton and his small crew of 5 located South Georgia Island, they encircled it for 2 days, trying to land, but the seas were too rough, and so they finally were able to land. Interestingly, I read this little tidbit that when the boat hit the shore, it's been told that the moment that they hit the shore, the main pin of the rudder fell out. But they ended up on the wrong side of the island. So, from where that port was, and so they set out to cross the unmapped island. No map. And they landed here and had to go there. And so, through the mountainous South Georgia Island to seek aid, they went. And through many harrowing, courageous endeavors of climbing up mountains, and they arrived at the port. It's pretty dangerous. You can read the story of what they did. They shared the news when they got to the port about the remaining crew members left behind. And they secured a ship to go rescue those crew members. And after leading 4 relief expeditions to get these crew members from South Georgia, Shackleton's original mission to get to the Antarctic changed. His second mission now was to rescue his team, and he did. Everyone. Throughout the entire ordeal, Shackleton's courage and grit and resilience stood out, saved his crew. Harvard Business School professor Nancy Cohen, a couple years ago, wrote an article in a journal, and she said this: the most important asset in surviving more than 18 months on the sea was Shackleton's leadership, and particularly the collective determination he fostered in his men to beat the odds and get home safely. The story has become legend. Have you heard it? How many have read it? Heard it? The century-old voyage is one of the bravest grit stories that I've heard. But what strikes me isn't necessarily how it ended, but how it began. How Shackleton recruited his team for this daring voyage. People told him he wouldn't get anyone to go with him for these extreme circumstances, but he did. Shackleton appealed to the noblest part of the human spirit as he posted this one ad in the London Times. The ad reveals kind of his blunt, straightforward way of thinking to appeal to the human will. Here it is: men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Someone put it this way. Oh, it's Tim Elmore in his article. He said this: those were the days when ships were made of wood and men were made of steel. Shackleton allegedly received 5,000 responses to this ad. From men who wanted to risk their life for a venture so challenging and they thought at that moment noble. And I think that's quite amazing, you know? So Tim Elmore breaks this down. I'm borrowing some things from his article. He shares what made this counterintuitive ad so appealing and how most people would differ today. So, hazardous journey? No thanks. I prefer free Wi-Fi, my Afghan, good food, hot coffee, some fun, and my creature comforts are demanding, so can't meet those, no thanks. But Shackleton, Tim Elmore highlighted, Shackleton appealed to the daring spirit most of us possess to do something risky. Most of us possess this. He tapped that to do something risky. Small wages? You kidding? I mean, I'm selling myself at the highest bidder, especially in this season of recession. I'm going to take a big risk, and it's going to have a big return, right? Tim Elmore said, but Shackleton knew the noblest part of our human spirit wants to work for something more than money. Have you met people who have met their money dream and they still aren't satisfied? Our human spirit wants something more, and Shackleton knew that. Bitter cold? Yeah. We already get that every winter, right? Up here? So, doesn't scare me. I'd rather be on a beach, though. You know? Give me Hawaii, Cancun, California, Miami, right? Life's already hard. So, give me something warm, please. But Tim Elmore highlights that Shackleton knew he had to be honest about what was coming, and his honesty would build trust in his team. He did not sugarcoat it, and the team was bound by that daring appeal. Complete darkness? Y'all know that, right? Right there, complete darkness. It's not like you haven't tried Alaska and you know, you guys have been here for a while. Some are gonna like give up. It's like it's too dark and I can't skip my daily dose of vitamin D. Some would say today I get depressed in the winter when days are short. Complete darkness? I don't know. But Shackleton knew if he prepared his men for a difficult time, they could create internal illumination between them. They could kind of encourage each other, and they did. Constant danger? Really? Tim Elmore said this, "You expect me to sign up for peril? I just endured the pandemic for 2 years. No thanks. You want me to get sick?" He highlighted that Shackleton knew he needed to prepare his men for frightening times so they would survive and succeed in this endeavor. He prepared them for the frightening days ahead. Safe return doubtful? You mean we commit to all this and may return maimed? Or may not return at all? Seriously? Who would sign up for that? Some today might say, well, I'd rather just do the AI journey with my artificial intelligence goggles and just experience it in my living room. Thank you. But Tim Elmore highlighted that Shackleton appealed to the noble spirit of those who long to do something very important and almost impossible. Think about that risk. Challenging, little pay, trusting a team, having to survive together, seemingly impossible odds for a vitally important task. Well, we can go there, can't we, as believers? Plant a new church, translate the Bible for an unreached people group. Just a side note, there's about 7,000 languages on the planet that we know of, 2,000 still yet to have a Bible. Start a nonprofit for urban poor. Give half your salary away for children without clothes or Wi-Fi, which is a real story. I'm not pulling that out of thin air. I know someone who does that. Do you? Give yourself away and move to an underdeveloped nation where you're going to get malaria, guaranteed, or something worse. Where would you go to get trained for that? I know a good college. To do something that important for Jesus, that's noble. And he will notice. Whether anybody else notices, you're going to make him famous, and he'll notice your grit. Grit and resilience are, I don't know, my chair in the college, they're foreign character traits these days. They're unheard of. But I still believe they're concepts that God put into the human spirit. And when his Holy Spirit is combined with the human spirit, then we'll seek out uncomfortable things and inconvenient things and risky things. We will not dodge those. And we won't prevent ourselves from enjoying genuine fulfillment in the dare. You know, while we love efficiencies of life, and they're really good today, aren't they? Did you have hot water like that? Did you have heat when you woke up? I mean, we have utilities today we just kind of take for granted. We love those efficiencies, and they create a lot of shortcuts that make life easier today, don't they? I still think, and I'm growing in this myself, but we try to instill in our kids at the college that we were made for something bigger, that we were created for something long, and you're called to something arduous and stretching and challenging. That's disciple making. That's preaching. That's mission work. That's entrepreneurial gospel endeavoring. I think that's what we're all called to. BBC, Boys Bible College, is attempting to build grit and resilience in kids who haven't had but a soft life. We see it coming. They love Jesus, but they don't have a lot of backbone. So we're trying to reinstate a backbone into their life. I think we have a good chance, and here's why. I think the college is a good chance because we hire well. Our faculty and our staff they model faithfulness. Our team has grit and resilience, and our students have the opportunity to watch them and to listen to them, and it's right in front of them. And man, I respect our team. I'm just a colleague with them and watch them myself. Our team is doing some amazing things. I think our staff is a reliable example for any student that wants to come and be prepared for endeavoring mission work. I also think we have a good chance because of stories like Ernest Shackleton and other missionaries And other men and women that we can retell. It offers perspective. It offers a broader angle. It helps us hear about unknown brave stories that God will use. Shackleton's crew of 27 men, although thousands signed up for the voyage, he only took 27, and all 27 returned. Pretty life-transforming venture. Can you imagine hearing their stories? I find it fitting that the ship that Shackleton sailed on, this is the ship that on an evening when it was frozen on the ice before it sunk. Can you pick out the name? This is it down 10,000 feet. That's the name of the ship. Endurance. Endurance at the bottom of the sea. It's a pretty fine characteristic. Maybe it's a growing, rare characteristic. It defined the ability to withstand the elements and to withstand the adversity that could have knocked him on his back. Webster defines it this way: the ability to sustain a prolonged, stressful effort or activity. The ability to sustain a prolonged, stressful effort or activity. Gritty resilience, endurance. That's a Jesus trait. That's a Christ-like habit. The term endurance is a word to describe Jesus. Open your Bible. This is the one verse for this lesson. Hebrews, as human beings, God made coffee beans in Hebrews, chapter 12. Chapter 12, the first couple of verses. Hebrews 12, the first couple of verses. It's on the screen if you want to also just follow along. I'm going to read it. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to Jesus. There's the key phrase. Looking to Jesus. He's the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the long journey to the cross. And he despised the shame, and he was seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Looking to Jesus. May it be said of Anchorage Christian Church, just this congregation. May it be said of you. May it be said of the students and the churches they represent that come to Boise Bible College. May it be said of all of us that we look to Jesus. Wouldn't that be great on your tombstone? That person looked to Jesus all the time. Set his gaze, set her gaze on Jesus. Not to survive, but to thrive. Looking to Jesus to thrive from where we are to where he wants us to be. And the endurance Jesus had to withstand hardship and adversity, I believe that will form us, that will shape us, and that will reshape us. And his grit and his resilience being infused into you and to me by his Holy Spirit, his strength, his resolve. You guys, that can only come by looking to him. There is no gut check and pulling myself from the bootstraps to go, I'm going to become grittier. I don't believe we can, our human spirit can't quite fulfill the mission that Jesus called us to without looking to him. The assignment he wants us to fulfill as he develops us. So let's let his endurance set sail in our life. Let's let his endurance influence you as you influence others with grace. Let's let his endurance, despising the shame, not making a name for himself, but in order to go through the cross, let's let his endurance influence us with his grace and with his truth, with his grit and his steadfastness and faithfulness, that we would be obedient to him. What he's calling you. If you have breath in your lungs, there's still a call. There's still an assignment that he wants to fulfill through you. Ultimately to make disciples, to make more Jesus followers, and to get equipped. Back to what I shared earlier, there's a desperate need for leaders with Jesus-type endurance. Boys Bible College is just one college that can help form that. So I beg of you, would you join us as we beg Jesus for more students, to allow the Spirit to touch the human spirit, to sign up for a daring venture, not for themselves, out of their comfort zone. And we have some stories. Let me just tell you one. David Hamilton and his wife Melissa, and Silas and Katie Moe are two graduates. 3 of the 4 are graduates from our college. They are brilliant students. They could teach at a university today. They're awfully smart. But they were caught by that desperate need of those 2,000 language groups that still have yet to have a Bible translated. And they have gone through the rigor of Bible college and now gone on to work for an organization that translates the Bible. And now they're stationed together in a part of North Africa that's just crazy to think about living in. They knew they would get malaria. They knew they would get sick. They knew. It's so rigorous. They told Nell and I that the organization they signed up for has required them to go off that North African field into another country at least 3 times a year for intentional restoration. Man, who does that? I admire their grit. I admire their faith. And you know what? They're going to help one people group have the Bible in some version of it's going to probably have some Arabic roots to it, but some versions, it's a dialect that's yet going to have the Bible. They're going to help one people group get a Bible. It's going to be a long haul. I don't know. What's the most daring thing you can think of for gospel impact? Even at your age, what is the most daring thing that you think he might want you to do with what capacity has made you to be in, to live that out? What are the good works he still is designed for you to yet to be a part of and fulfilling? What is that? What is that? Oh Lord, I'm looking to you. What do you want to do through me? May this church be that sort of an impacting church for a younger generation that would see something in you and they would be willing to follow and remember your example of grit and resilience and endurance, such that they would do that innately, naturally. And maybe they'll come and walk through the halls of a college that'll help them become servant leaders, to help build up the church worldwide so the gospel can impact people's lives. That's the lesson today. How about if we spend some time praying, okay? Let's bow. We look to you, Jesus. You are the most reliable source we can look to. When we look to you, this verse reminds us of how you endured. And we want that character trait. In honesty, we're awfully soft. And we're awfully comfortable. So it's a bit of a daring thing to look to you. Because if we do, we believe you'll shape us, and you will send us, you'll deploy us, you will indwell us and strengthen us to be gritty, resilient servant leaders, carrying out the gospel in the way you've called us and designed us to fulfill the works that you've dreamed for us to be a part of. I'm praying for this congregation, for these friends here, with a softened heart and palms up and open to be ready. And I'm praying that you would revive a generation around this part of Anchorage, a young generation that would follow their example, praying for more to want to be equipped to help build your church and to lead your church. Would you bless, please? Would you bless? Would you call? Would you send out workers for the harvest? We pray. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Yeah.